The 8 guns that changed everything. The 8th of March, 1944, 27,000 feet above Erkner, Germany. The Messerschmitt rolls inverted, diving hard. The German pilot has seen this American fighter before, the fat one, the Jug, the plane they call the milk bottle with wings. He's confident, almost amused. His radio crackles with laughter from his wingman. Then the sky erupts. 8 streams of 50 caliber fire converge. The sound is like canvas tearing at the speed of thought. Pieces of his aircraft begin disappearing. Not breaking, disappearing. He pulls hard, too hard. The controls go slack. He's falling now, and in his last clear moment before ejection, he realizes something terrible. He was wrong about this airplane. They all were. Introduction. The Ridicule, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat in April 1943, carrying more weight than respect. 7 tons of aluminum, steel, and contempt. It was the heaviest single-engine fighter ever built at that time. While the Spitfire weighed in at a graceful 5,000 pounds empty, and the Messerschmitt Bf-109 at 4,400, the P-47 tipped the scales at nearly 10,000 pounds empty and over 17,000 fully loaded. American pilots hated it at first. British pilots mocked it openly. And German pilots? They saw it lumbering into the European theater and felt something close to relief. The Luftwaffe had a nickname for it. Der Jug, short for juggernaut, but the tone was sarcastic. A jug, heavy, awkward, ungainly. In the tight, twisting dogfights over France and Germany, weight was death, agility was life. Every fighter pilot knew this. The P-47 seemed to violate every principle of air combat design. But 8 Browning M250 caliber machine guns don't care about principles, they care about physics. And in the hands of American pilots who learned to use them correctly, those 8 guns would rewrite the rules of air warfare in Europe. Act 1. The designer's gamble. To understand how the P-47 became what it became, you have to go back to a cramped office in Farmingdale, Long Island, in 1940. Alexander Kartveli sits at a drafting table, chain-smoking, staring at a problem. Born in Tiflis, Georgia, the one in the Russian Empire, Kartveli had fled revolution, studied in Paris, and eventually landed in America with nothing but his engineering degree and an obsession with radial engines. By 1940, he was chief engineer at Republic Aviation, and he had orders to design a fighter, not just any fighter, a fighter that could escort bombers deep into Germany, a fighter that could survive the new reality of high-altitude combat, a fighter that could take damage and keep flying. The US Army Air Corps had initially wanted a lightweight interceptor, something in the mold of the P-43 Lancer. But intelligence reports from Europe were changing the requirements weekly. The war was revealing uncomfortable truths. Fights were happening above 25,000 feet. Planes were being shredded by cannon fire. Range mattered more than anyone had predicted. Kartveli made a decision that would define everything. He chose the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, a monstrous 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower. It was the most powerful aircraft engine in production. But radial engines are wide. They create drag. To minimize that drag at high altitude, Kartveli needed a turbocharger. The turbocharger became the P-47's defining feature and its original sin. Mounted in the rear fuselage, it required complex ducting. That ducting required space. That space added weight. That weight required a larger wing. That wing required more structural support. A design spiral, each solution creating new problems. By the time Kartveli finished, he had created something unprecedented. A fighter built around an engine and a turbocharger, wrapped in armor and armed to an absurd degree. 8 50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing, 3,400 rounds of ammunition. Most contemporary fighters carried 4 guns. Some carried 6. The P-47 doubled down. The guns. Technical interlude. The Browning M250 caliber machine gun was already a legend before it ever flew. Designed by John Browning in 1918, refined through the 1,930 seconds, it fired a cartridge measuring half an inch in diameter at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Each round weighed about 2 ounces. The kinetic energy was devastating. Unlike the rifle-caliber guns on earlier fighters, the 50 caliber could punch through engine blocks, sever control cables deep inside an airframe, and ignite fuel tanks from hundreds of yards away. 1 gun was dangerous, 2 was effective, 4 was standard, 8 was apocalyptic. The rate of fire for all 8 guns combined was roughly 800 rounds per minute. That's more than 13 rounds per second. All of them armor-piercing incendiary or tracer rounds, all of them converging on a target point approximately 300 yards ahead of the aircraft. Pilots called it the 8-gun symphony. German pilots, when they survived, called it something else. Act 2, The Trouble Debut, April 1943. The 56th Fighter Group arrives in England with their new Thunderbolts. The British are polite but unconvinced. The American pilots are openly skeptical, and the Germans are about to receive an education. Except the education goes both ways. The first missions are disasters, not because of the plane, but because American doctrine hasn't caught up to American engineering. Pilots try to dogfight the Luftwaffe at low altitude and medium speed, exactly where the P-47 is most vulnerable. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf Flu 190 can turn inside the Thunderbolt, climb faster initially, and accelerate quicker in a dive from level flight. Losses mount, morale craters. Letters home describe the P-47 as a 7-ton milk truck. One pilot writes to his family, "They've given us elephants and asked us to dance with gazelles." Then something begins to change. A handful of pilots, veterans, mavericks, men willing to ignore doctrine start fighting differently. They stop trying to turn with German fighters. They start using altitude. They start using speed. They start using boom and zoom tactics, dive from above, fire the 8 guns, and use the dive speed to climb back to altitude before the enemy can respond. The P-47, they discover, is the fastest diving fighter in the world. It can reach speeds over 550 miles per hour in a dive without the controls locking up or the wings departing the aircraft, a fatal flaw in many other fighters. And at high altitude, above 25,000 feet, where the turbocharger really starts working, the P-47 is faster than almost anything Germany has. The turning point, individual stories. Hub Zemke sees it first. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, is the kind of officer who learns by doing. In early 1943, he takes his Thunderbolt up alone, experimenting. He pushes it to 40,000 feet. He dives it to the red line. He fires the guns until the barrels glow. He writes new tactics. He drills his pilots relentlessly. Energy is altitude. Altitude is life. Never, ever try to turn with them. By summer, the 56th is getting kills. By autumn, they're getting aces. France's Gabby Gabreski, a quiet Polish-American from Pennsylvania, becomes the top P-47 ace in Europe. 28 confirmed kills. His technique is pure discipline. Get above, get fast, fire once, leave. He later describes the P-47's firepower. You hit them once with all 8 guns, and there's nothing left to hit again. Robert S. Johnson survives something that becomes legend. The 26th of June, 1943. Johnson's P-47 is hit by a Forn 190 over France. Cannon shells tear through his aircraft. His canopy is shot away. His oxygen system is destroyed. He's bleeding from multiple wounds, half conscious, unable to bail out. The German pilot pulls alongside to confirm the kill. Johnson, barely aware, looks over at him. The German pilot, later believed to be Egon Meyer, sees the American's condition and makes a decision. He salutes and flies away. Johnson nurses the crippled Thunderbolt back across the channel. He lands at an emergency strip in England with over 200 holes in his aircraft. The ground crew is silent when they see it. The chief mechanic walks around the plane twice, then says, "Son, this thing brought you home." The P-47's reputation begins to shift, not because it's beautiful or agile, but because it's tough, survivable, forgiving, and armed like a warship. Act 3. The German Perspective. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler remembers the day he stopped laughing. In early 1944, Stigler is an experienced Luftwaffe pilot with over 20 kills. He's flown against Spitfires, P-51 seconds, and the early P 47 seconds. The Thunderbolt, he's been told, is a target-rich environment if you can catch it slow. Then he encounters one that isn't slow. The engagement lasts 4 seconds. The American pilot named Unknown dives from 30,000 feet, fires a burst that sounds like a freight train passing through sheet metal, and climbs back into the sun before Stigler can even bring his guns to bear. Stigler's wingman is gone. Just gone. The aircraft is falling in pieces too small to identify as airplane parts. After the war, Stigler will write, "We learned to fear the sound before we feared the plane. That sound 850 calibers, at once it was distinctive. You heard it, and if you had any sense you ran." German tactics evolve in response. Luftwaffe commanders issue new directives. Avoid engaging P-47 seconds below 20,000 feet. Don't chase them in a dive. Don't assume they're clumsy. And for God's sake, don't let them get on your 6, because if those 8 guns find you, there's no armor that will save you. The tables have turned completely. The peak, statistical dominance. By mid-1944, the numbers tell a story, the anecdotes only hint at. The P-47 accounts for more aerial victories than any other American fighter in the European theater. Not because it's better at dogfighting, it isn't, but because American pilots have learned to fight the P-47's fight, not the enemy's fight. Altitude, speed, firepower, survivability. The 850 caliber guns give P-47 pilots a margin of error. You don't need a perfect shot. You don't need sustained tracking. You need one good burst, 2 seconds, maybe 3, and the target is shredded. German pilots begin avoiding combat when they spot P-47 seconds. They radio warnings. They dive for the deck. The psychological advantage shifts completely. But the P-47's greatest contribution isn't in air-to-air combat. It's what happens when those 8 guns point down. The ground attack monster. Someone, somewhere in the 8th Air Force, has a realization. If 850 calibers can destroy a fighter aircraft, what can they do to a truck? A train? A bridge? The answer reshapes the entire tactical bombing campaign. The P-47 becomes a ground attack nightmare. It carries bombs up to 2,500 pounds externally. It carries rockets 10 5-inch HVARs. But it's the guns that terrify German ground forces. Each 50 caliber round can penetrate an inch of armor at 500 yards. Against trucks, trains, and soft vehicles, they're lethal at over 1,000 yards. A single P-47 making a strafing run can destroy an entire convoy in one pass. Pilots develop new techniques. They learn to skip rounds off roads into the undercarriages of vehicles. They learn to aim for locomotive boilers, causing catastrophic steam explosions. They learn that sustained fire can cut through rail lines, down telegraph poles, and ignite fuel depots. The tactical impact is immeasurable. By late 1944, German ground forces in France can't move during daylight. Supply lines collapse, reinforcements bog down. The Wehrmacht's logistical system, already strained, begins to break. And overhead, the distinctive sound, 8 guns firing in harmony.
The human coast. Perspective shift. War is not a spreadsheet. Every kill recorded in a P-47 pilot's logbook represents someone who didn't go home. Every strafing run that destroys a convoy kills drivers, mechanics, soldiers, many of them conscripts, many of them teenagers. The German pilots who laughed in 1943 are, by 1944, mostly dead or captured. The average Luftwaffe pilot, by the war's end, has less than 30 hours of training. They're flying obsolete tactics in increasingly desperate circumstances. American pilots don't celebrate this. They're professionals doing a job that requires killing. Many will wrestle with it for decades. But in the moment, in the cockpit at 400 miles per hour with a Focke-Wulf on your tail, the 8 guns are the difference between going home and not going home. And every pilot knows it. The P-47 becomes a symbol of something larger. Overwhelming material and industrial strength. The ability to build not just good enough, but overpowering, to compensate for lack of agility with surplus of everything else, power, armor, ammunition. It's very American, and by 1945 it's worked. The numbers. Final accounting. 15,000, 636 P-47 seconds built, more than any other American fighter, except the P-51 Mustang. 3,752 aerial victories in Europe alone. Over 9,000 locomotives destroyed. Over 86,000 railway cars. Over 68,000 trucks. But the statistic that matters most to the pilots: the lowest loss rate per mission of any American fighter in the European theater. You could bring a P-47 home with damage that would have downed any other aircraft. Pilots landed with one wing shredded, with engines smoking, with controls barely responding. The airplane absorbed punishment and kept flying. Alexander Kartveli's gamble, build heavy, build tough, build powerful, had paid off in a currency measured in lives saved. Epilogue. Full circle. The 8th of March, 1944, 27,000 feet above Erkner, Germany. The German pilot pulls his ripcord. His parachute opens. Below him, his Messerschmitt tumbles, trailing smoke. Above him, the P-47 banks away. 8 guns silent now. Mission accomplished. He watches it go, that fat, ungainly aircraft they'd all laughed at, and understands with perfect clarity that the laughter had been a mistake, a fatal one for many of his friends. The Thunderbolt wasn't designed to be graceful. It was designed to win. And it did. Conclusion: the legacy. Today, only a handful of P-47 Thunderbolts still fly. They're museum pieces, airshow attractions, monuments to engineering and the men who flew them. But when one takes off, when that massive R-2800 engine roars to life, when those broad wings lift 7 tons of history into the air, you can still see what made it extraordinary. Not beauty, not elegance, not the things we associate with great fighters. Presence, power, purpose. The P-47 was the airplane that proved firepower could overcome finesse. That survival mattered more than statistics. That in the crucible of war, being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage. German pilots learned this lesson at 27,000 feet, traveling 400 miles per hour, in the seconds before 850 caliber guns found their mark. They laughed at the jug, right up until the moment they didn't. And by then, it was far too late. The sky belonged to the Thunderbolt. The end. The narrative alternates between personal stories, technical detail, and broader strategic context, using the 8 guns as a recurring motif that ties together themes of underestimation, industrial might, and tactical evolution. The opening and closing mirror each other to create narrative symmetry, while the middle sections build tension through contrast between initial failure and eventual dominance. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more world stories and events.